evening, everyone. We need to start right at 7 because this thing is live on the YouTube as well. So I would request the panelist, Dr. Rasik Ravindran sir, Ms. Sandhya Singh, Dr. Commodore Shotriya, to please be on the panel. I'll just give a brief introduction to what we are planning and working on today. And then, of course, we'll start with the main lecture. Over the years, we have known that the blue economy there has been the global consensus on blue economy as a development paradigm. Many countries have envisaged their future growth, economic growth on blue economy. There has been expanding blue voice that we call. There are national, regional, even at the G20 level also, countries are working on the oceans. They have a policy, national policies. They have strategies on blue economy, ocean economy. Budgetary provisions are being provided to the sector. Different countries have blue economy models, for example, Mauritius, Seychelles, Bangladesh, etc. And we know that blue economy is itself is a multi-sectoral sciences. It is spread across a lot of sectoral coverage is there are traditional sectors, there are emerging sectors, and given the emerging challenges and the untapped potential that these sectors have, it becomes necessary to do a systematic measurement of the blue economy when we are talking about it, and it is very critical for the ocean governance. And for that we have a great panel today. We have Dr. Rasik Ravindran sir, who would be chairing the session. He's a well-known expert on blue economy and of course does not need any introduction. He's currently chairing the Society of Earth Sciences India. He's a senior vice president of Lights and the member of Research Advisory Committee of NCPOR. He has also held various positions in the government earlier, being director of NCPOR, deputy director general GSI, chairman program monitoring committee on dynamics of Himalayan glaciers, a lot of others. He has also participated in several Indian expeditions to Antarctica. He has led the first Indian expedition to South Pole and the first expedition to Arctic from India. I have a whole list of all the awards that he has been awarded. So I would skip those. Of course, we can talk about later. And our lead speaker for the session is Ms. Sandhya Singh. She's an expert statistician and IIMB alumnus, having 25 experience as an Indian Statistical Service officer. She has held served in various sectors in the government of India, like Swachh Bharat Mission, rural water and sanitation, tourism, health, communication. She's currently serving as the Deputy Director General of Social Statistical Division, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, and has been responsible for overseeing environmental accounting and ocean accounting. She has also served as global expert on maternal mortality estimation for the WTO and MMR estimation and she has represented India in various international forums and for MMR estimation and ocean accounting. And of course, we have Dr. Shotriya. He's our lead in the CMEC at RIS, and of course, he does not need any introduction as such. So first, I would request Ms. Sandhya to go for her presentation, and then we can have some comments from the chair, and then we can open the floor for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Pankhuri. Good afternoon, everyone. As Pankhuri has already introduced. Sorry. So today I will be talking about the blue economy contribution and its what are the perspectives in future and how it is contributing to the India's GDP. So I will be looking at what is the present status, where we have to go forward and how we have to go forward, what are the gaps, what need to be done in order to reach to our target. So with these objectives, thank you. With these objectives, I will be giving a small presentation and then we can have a discussion. So with your permission, sir, I just start. So, in order to understand what is a blue economy, so traditionally, when we talk about the blue economy, the only thing that comes to our mind is the sea, and majority of the people who understand about the blue economy is like the fishing, the fisheries industries, or somewhat the ocean maritime. That might be only contributing to the sea economy. But definition wise, sea economy consists of uh, basically a broader than what we normally think it might be. So it's basically a subset of national economy which comprises of entire system of ocean resources which are man-made infrastructure within the legal jurisdiction of the country's boundaries, that they are basically the driving force for the economic growth. They're also environmental sustainability and national security. So in short, blue economy consists of all the things which are within the sea, over the sea, and also deep inside the sea. So every component of the sea at these three levels that contribute to the blue economy. So if you have to just look at the surface, so all the three fragments, the surface, the midwater, and also the deep sea. So these are the three fragments which contribute entirely for the blue economy. So if I have to talk about the surface, which are basically the visible assets. So there are three main things. One is the maritime trade and shipping that we normally see, that ships are carrying lots of goods and services to the entire world. And then the port infrastructure, that is also part of the economy and that contributes to the GDP of the country. So in the ports, we have lots of facilities where multiple ships, they come, they lodge there, they provide all kind of materials. So lots of employment is generated in the ports also. Then comes the coastal tourism. So coastal tourism, everybody is fond of going to the beaches. We go to the beaches, we enjoy, we have life there. So that also contributes to a huge part in the economy. Then comes the water column, the biological assets. So in the biological asset comes the fisheries, the fishes, the maritime fisheries, and also then mariculture, which is now developing into different kind of cage farming, seaweeds, etc., are being generated as part of this. So this is mariculture is basically, instead of culturing the fish or related products in the white water or the surface water, things are created within the sea water in the same kind of conditions. So that's how it is a new culture which is coming up. Then marine biotechnology is also there. So lots of different kind of medicines, pharmaceuticals, also biofuels and enzymes. They are coming from different sea creatures which are living at different layers of the sea. So lots of inventions are being done. There are multiple kind of medicines which are being produced out of the sea creatures, enzymes and proteins, because the sea creatures who are living just beneath the sea in extremely hard kind of conditions, extremely not livable kind of conditions, they create metabolic proteins and all those which are not easy to find out in any of the surface animals or surface uh, agriculture or surface things. So those are being exploited for this purpose. So that comes under marine biotechnology. And then comes the deep sea, uh, which are the emerging assets. So one is the deep sea mining. So above the deep sea at around 6,000 kilometers, 6,000 meters, there are multi-metallic kind of modules, potato kind of structures, which are rich in nickel, cobalt, and other kind of rare earth metals. So everywhere in the sea, they are plenty available, and there are technologies now coming up from which, using that, we can get all these things from the deep sea. Then offshore energy. So we have been looking into like wind power. So coastal windmills, everybody might have seen when we go to the coast, lots of windmills we see. But apart from the windmills, there are tidal powers which has lots of energy, and they are being explored to generate lots of electricity, lots of energy, which can be translated as non-renewable and also green energy, which will be helping in order to generate more value for the ports, for other supplies which are required in the sea areas. Then is the submarine cabling, that also a deep sea infrastructure. So we all are connected through internet, and you will be surprised to know that these cables, which are deep down at the seabed level, were started as early as in the 1870. So the first sea cable was established in the deep sea in 1870s, and now onwards, lots of new technologies have come up, and now presently we have fiber optics cables, which are very strengthened with some glass and other kind of materials. And if you look at that high speed internet, every time we use the internet from any country, the data is translated through these wires only. So if you have look at the kind of how much the wires would be in the seabed, it would be, if we have to just look at the diameter, it will be at least 3 to 4 times of the entire earth diameter. That long wires are lying in the seabed, which is connecting the entire world through the internet facility. So this is like a broadly in nutshell what the sea economy or the blue economy that we talk about contribution. So now here I would just like to make an exception. uh, Presently 7517 kilometer is not the coastline. It has been revised to 9000 kilometer, but in somewhere you will find that it is 11,000 also. But earth sciences may correct me that it's being curtailed to 9000 only. 11 is because last time when I met someone from the earth sciences, they said that we are not advocating for 11,000, only for 9,000. It's notified. Okay, so I make myself corrected. It's not 7,517. It is 11,000. Sorry in my presentation because this was everywhere. So I just use this. Anyway, so if I have to look at what is the vastness and where the India can sustain or where India can leap into the blue economy. So we have got a huge territory, roughly around 11,000 kilometer of coastline we have. This coastline comprises of 1,382 islands and also 9 coastal states. So we have a huge coverage in terms of manpower, in terms of facilities, and in terms of natural habitat that we have in the territory. Trade-wise, around 95% of India's trade by volume, the maritime trade, the merchandise trade, happens through sea route only. And if I have to look at the infrastructure, the ports, we have 12 major ports and 187 non-major ports. They all together, they consist of around 1,400 million tons of cargo every year. So that's a huge volume that's being handled by these ports, and every time the infrastructure is increasing, and we are forecasting that this may increase to many-fold. And human capital wise also roughly around 4 million people, especially the fishermen and coastal communities, they survive for their livelihood in the blue economy or the sea. So basically, if I have to look at the current baseline, the blue economy contributes around 4% to the India's GDP, but it has got a big baseline which can still be explored. So like in the previous slide, we have seen that 95% of the merchandise trade is happening through the sea. But looking at this huge number, 95% is a big number. So entire economic value or the exim or trade transport which is happening through the sea, but only contribution is 4%. So it means there is lots of gap which can be tapped in order to get more contribution of the blue economy into the GDP. Even there are roughly, if I have to look at only in the fisheries sector, roughly around 2.8 crores of people are directly employed by this sector in India. India is producer of 8% of the global fish production. So that's a big contribution, and that's how India is ranked 2nd in the world. And in the last one decade, from 2014 to 2024, the seafood export of India has also doubled. So it is roughly doubled in 10 years. So we are seeing that in another 10 to 20 years, it may be many-fold. So existing foundational sectors which are currently serving to the GDP of the country are fisheries that we can straight away see, then shipping and ports, offshore oil and gas, oil exploration is happening from the seabed, And there are from the gas also roughly around 50% of the amount of gas required is self-generated from Indian coast. Coastal tourism is one, and marine biotechnologies, which is also in a big way contributing to the current GDP scenario. So, like I was talking about the huge gap. So, looking at the huge gap of 95 to 4% contribution to GDP, India has now targeted that by 2035 we should aim for getting to the figures of 12 to 15% contribution of the GDP in terms of blue economy to the entire GDP of the country. So, achieving this leap requires moving beyond traditional extraction and aggressively scaling next generation maritime industries. So, what can be those maritime industries? So, for that purpose, now if I have to look at what is the global blue economy contribution, globally also the blue economy contributes to around 3 to 6 trillion of annual turnover to the entire global economy, which generates around 260 millions of job only in the fisheries and aquaculture, and 100 billion per year is the contribution to the global economy. So these are the global numbers. So it means there is a huge potential in this sector which can be explored in terms of India as well. So in India, what we are doing presently and where we can look into. So fisheries and aquaculture is one sector. As I already told, that it's the second largest producer of fish in the world, 8% of the total world requirement. 184 lakhs of tons as per 2024 figures. This was the amount that was produced from the fish. And under the PM Matsya Sampada Yojana, PMMSY scheme, roughly around 20,050 crore has been invested in this sector. In the trade also, maritime trade and ports, 12 ports, and roughly around 1,500 million tons of cargo they are carrying. So average with the invent of new technology and also with the kind of schemes like Sagarmala program, this turnaround time for every ship, which was roughly around 98 hours as early as in 2014, it has come down to 50%, roughly 50% now. So now turnaround time for a ship or a big vessel in the Indian port has come down to 48.6 to 48 hours now. So this has contributed, this could be done because of the Sagarmala program. Then offshore oil and gases. So offshore oil and gases, they are the domestic energy security for the country. 30% of the domestic crude is coming from our own, especially the Bombay High shore area. And also 50% of the natural gas which is required in the country is coming from our sea only. So it can again be explored more and looked into. The maritime tourism also is an emerging sector. In this, 12 blue flag beaches have been identified, which are supported by Cruise Bharat Mission and Swadesh Darshan Yojana, which has recently launched by Niti Aayog. They have brought the Swadesh Darshan 2.0. And for this purpose, Lakshadweep and Andaman and Nicobar, they are being developed to attract different kind of tourists from India and the international as well. So just to look at what can be the drivers, the government of India, especially with the vision of the Prime Minister, who could see that how blue economy can be looked into, as in his word only, the Prime Minister has said that to me, the blue chakra or wheel in India's national flag represents the potential of blue revolution or the ocean economy. That is how central the ocean economy is to us. So he could see that within the Indian flag, the blue chakra, which is very central for the country's pride, the flag. Similarly, the blue economy is that central to the economic growth of the country, to the GDP of the country. So in order to make it that prominent, a 7-pillar strategic framework has been prepared. And it has been named as the Blue Chakra, Blue Economy Chakra. So this framework consists of national accounting framework and ocean governance in order to have proper governance and management of all the resources. Then coastal marine special planning and tourism. So with the use of special marine planning, different kind of stakeholders can be given different priorities, and everybody can influence from the sea products or the sea side area as per the requirement, and also tourism. Marine fisheries, aquacultures, and their processing can be developed as one of the pillars. Then manufacturing, trade, technology, and skill development. Skill development of the coastal people, they can be made aware of what the blue economy is, how they can get the benefits from that in a better way, though they are already dependent on it. Then logistic infrastructure and shipping is one of the pillars. Coastal and deep sea mining and energy. So this is the sixth pillar, which is having huge potential. Then security, strategic dimension, and international engagements. So these are the 7 pillars of the strategic framework which will be driving this growth for us to reach to 12 to 15% of GDP contribution by 2035. So in order to reach to these 6 pillars, the industries which will be fetching the most economic development or most economic contribution, so they are the 6 industries which will be having the exponential growth in order to reach to 12 to 15%. So they will have been categorized basically in energy, technology, and services and systems. So marine renewable energy, which is basically the offshore wind, tidal, and wave energy for long term clean power, green power that we have been talking about. Then digital ocean technologies, the AI driven surveillance programs, satellite mapping of the different resources, natural resources in the sea at the bottom level and also at the surface level and mid level. Then this will help in smart fisheries management. Advanced aquaculture is one industry wherein technology driven farming with the reduced pressure, this will reduce the pressure on the wild stock which is there in the fisheries sector. This will also give rise to regeneration of the fisheries product. Then marine biotechnology, in that sourcing different kind of pharmaceuticals, biofuels, and also nutraceuticals and marine organisms. So all these will help in developing different kind of biofuels and also different kind of chemicals, enzymes, which will give rise to the medicines which are required for very rare kind of, especially the cancer or other different diseases for which the medicines are not presently available. So this will help in that. Then is the circular economy. So now what we see in the seaside is everywhere when we go, we see that lots of plastic waste. In fact, somewhere I have heard that roughly around a size of Australia kind of area is filled with plastic in the sea. So if that amount of plastic which is there in the sea is basically hampering the sea life and also the sea organism, and in terms of economy, if I have to talk, it is also hampering the development of the different economic resources that can be cultivated and made contribution to the GDP. So circular economy basically will be for recycling of different products that are there, and the plastic which is there can be reused for industrial purposes or other purposes. So that is something which will come under circular economy. And then ocean based tourism. So for the ocean based tourism, high value ecotourism and coastal cruise experiences, now you see that India has launched the cruise services inland and in the sea also. So that is also having a huge potential. So these are the 6 emerging engines or the economies that would be helping for us to reach to the target of 12 to 15%. So if I have to look by the pillar wise, the first pillar that I am talking about is architecture, next generation maritime trade. So 95% maritime trade is happening through the sea. So basically it is handling 70% of the India's trade by value. Volume 95%, but the value is around 70% of the total trade. And we have a 16th largest maritime globally. We are the 16th country in these terms. For this, in order to increase more into this and also get the more benefit from this, the policy enabler has been 100% FDI have been permitted through automatic route for ports. 10 years tax holiday have been granted for port development enterprises by Government of India. So these are the two policies which are there in order to increase this maritime trade. For example, two mega projects, one at Maharashtra, Vadhavan Port. It is being developed at an investment of 9 billion, and it will be the 13th, because we already have 12 major ports. It would be the 13th major port, which will also be working on PPP model, public-private ship model for increased EXIM capacity. And the second is Galathea Bay at Andaman and Nicobar, which is being developed at a budget of $5.2 billion, and it is being designed to capture international transit cargo, and its phase 1 will be we are expecting to start it by 2021. So these are the two projects that is already there. Then in order to transform the logistics, what is required is operational efficiency is required. So operational efficiency has been increased from earlier 93.5 hours to now 48 hours turnaround time for the ship in the ports. So, and the contributor for this particular achievement has been the Sagarmala project, under which roughly 8 lakh crore has been invested through PPP and also by the government. Then is the Amrit Kal Vision 2047, under which roughly around $916 billion contribution have been initiated, wherein roughly 300 plus new initiative and Moja projects are coming up. The two, which the Andaman one and the Maharashtra, are also lying in this book. So if I have to look at Sagarmala project, which is one of the main project which is giving maximum thrust to the maritime trade. So it is majorly focusing of shipbuilding facilities, then multimodal logistic parks and coastal economic zones expansion. So governance, etc. Everything comes under the Sagarmala project. So under this project, for 30 years shipbuilding plan have been initiated. So there would be a master plan for greenfield indigenous shipbuilding under the Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative, that will focusing on energy efficient designs like LNG carrier and shoaler fishing boats, etc. So major focus is towards the green initiatives and green energy based shipping. Then maritime clusters are being developed. East and West Coast, both shipbuilding are being developed under the MSME ancillary support. Then there has been a PPP model for mobilizing the fund for ship repair, port equipment, cruise terminal, and technology development. So all the three things, the technology, the finances, and also the planning support has been provided for shipbuilding facilities under the Sagarmala project. And for multimodal logistic parks, a national multimodal network on a digital grid has been created to slash the last mile transit costs. So the second pillar is scaling the fisheries and aquaculture ecosystem. So in which the KPI has been the production as of now in 2024, 184 lakh tons of fish has been produced in India. India is now the second largest producer and having 8% global share. It is supporting around 30 million livelihood and presently, in order to uplift this particular area, a $324 million amount of budget has been allocated to Ministry of Fisheries in year 2026, FY26. So there are two programs, PMM-SY and FIDF, which will be basically looking at the modernization, biofloc, recirculatory system. This will also be having capital subsidies up to 60% for marginal communities. So in the fisheries system, what Blue Revolution will help in? So the scale of production, which was like manual, man-made, and though we could achieve second position in the world, not because that we were doing very good, but because we have got a big coastline and also lots of natural capital in terms of fish. So this was there, but with the strategic investment, with the new scheme support, we are seeing that it will be a green transition instead of the old fashioned uh, vehicles or the fishing boats. Will be having the now the new technology, and with the AI enabled maps wherein we will be able to look into where the fishes are, where the fishes should go. Now the Enquiry Center, which is there in Hyderabad, they have developed technologies. In fact, they have developed such a technology that in a matter of few seconds, all the fishermen are given critical signals in terms of if this any kind of uh, typhoon or any kind of uh, what to say, disaster. Yeah, so disaster signaling can be done in fraction of seconds through mobile phones. So lots of people are getting benefit of this, and also where most likely the fishes or the different other components might be, so that is also can be up to like 90 to 95% accuracy they are able to tell to the fishermen. Apart from fisheries sector, we have marine renewable energy in terms of tidal energy and also wave energy. So 70 gigawatt offshore wind potential is there, which is basically concentrated in two states, Gujarat and Tamil Nadu. So they are doing it. And around viability gap funding, which is government of India is providing USD 894 dollars is being provided for this renewable energy, and biotechnology also, marine biotechnology and deep sea mining. So under the deep sea ocean mission, 418 million budget has been kept, and roughly around 15,000 plus marine species for pharmaceutical neutrals and biofuels are being explored under this scheme. So pillar 3 is engineering sustainable coastal tourism. So for sustainable coastal tourism, 12 certified blue flag beaches of these 12, two are the main one are Shivrajpur and Golden Beach. They have been identified under Swadesh Darshan Yojana. There are 57 new sites are being developed, and India is also looking into India's first water villa and premium eco resorts in Lakshadweep and Andaman and Nicobar. So they are already in terms of like in Maldives. India is also looking at all these. In 2022, tourism strategy was brought in, national strategy under which tourism was structured around environmental protection, biodiversity conservation, and long-term economic sustainability. So ecotourism and coastal tourism has been put on priority. Then the new one, the Cruise Bharat mission, which is aggressively expanding, targeting around 5 million annual cruise passengers and development of 25 operational cruise terminals by 2047. So these are all in line, and they will contribute for the target of 12 to 50% GDP contribution. So the core principle behind the tourism has been ecotourism standards, Cruise Bharat mission. The core principle has been the coastal development must preserve, not degrade. The marine ecosystems that form the foundation of the tourism product, they need to be sustained for a longer time, not exploited and used in a small time. So the innovation enablers for this entire has been in the surface, digital logistics that will majorly impact. Then in the mid-water, monitoring of the sea resources and also the sea disasters. All these monitoring and efficiency of the turnaround time and also efficiency of doing the things online will be a big role player. And in the deep ocean, the exploration. For that, India has also applied for different licenses from the international authorities to reach to the different deep sea trenches where these rare minerals are available. So the policy that is catalyzing the blue economy, so it has started from 2021, September 21, when Deep Ocean Mission has come into play, under which $418 million investment for sea resources and development sustainable technologies have been put. In October 23, Maritime Amrit Kal Vision 2047 was conceptualized. Under this, 960 billion proposed investment spanning 300 plus initiatives have been put in. And in July 24, Green Tech Transition Program was introduced for replacing traditional harbor tugs with cleaner alternatives, 100% green fueled, with more efficient systems. And in August 2024, Shrimp Broad Stock Initiative have been launched. So in this initiative, Nucleus Breeding Center have also been created. So we have looked at how we will be trying to reach to the goal of 12 to 15% of the economy. But what can be the catalyst? That also we have looked into. But growth without sustainability is mathematically and structurally dangerous. Why it is dangerous? Because we have seen that overfishing, if we don't look at the sustainability of the fishes, critical depletion of wild fish stock, that will threaten the baseline food security. The entire food security and food chain that will be threatened. Then marine pollution will also increase if we will not look into the circular economy. The acute elimination of plastic waste that will choke the coastal economic zones. Then sea levels will rise. So if the sea levels will rise, the water levels will rise, and all the infrastructure that we are thinking of creating in order to harness the economic benefit of the seas, the port, all other infrastructure that will be eaten up by the rise, the sea itself. The sea will accumulate everything into it, and so that's why we need to look at that also, that sea level should not rise. Climate change, this will also altering the temperature will directly affect different sea organism and also the different coastal livelihoods. So we need to look at, so now the idea is like how we can look into the target of 12 to 15% with sustainability. Blue economy in India, in terms of the global, the nearest neighbors, the nearest competitors, if we have to look at that, India is contributing 4%. China is contributing to roughly around 10%. Brazil is contributing to around 2.5%. The only difference that we could see is that India has not fully adopted to the sustainability as of now. We are going into it, but it's not being implemented in any of the states fully. However, China and Brazil, China has implemented in 11 provinces, and Brazil is like they have piloted at least for the SIA water framework in. So that's why there is a requirement that India should look into the sustainability part of it and try to adopt the UNCR framework for sustainability of the ocean resources. So for achieving to the 2035 target with sustainability, definite shift from exploitation to management is required. So for this, the core principle in the traditional ocean economy, what we were doing was, we were thinking that we have got infinite resources. They're not going to deplete anyway. So we were just getting it. But in the sustainable blue economy, what we need to do is, we have to understand that's a finite natural capital and we have to manage it properly. What can be the matrix of success for sustainability? So traditionally what we were doing was we were just looking at the volume of extraction. For example, if I have to look at the fish, we were just looking what is the size of the catch that I have got and how much fossil fuel or how much fish I have got it. But we were not looking into what is being in turn affecting the sea life or the sea resources. So in the sustainable blue economy, what we need to do is we have to look at the ecological balance so that we can have long-term yield, not just for today, but for years to come together. And for that, the methodology that we have to use, what we have been using is the manual, reactive, high waste operation. Nobody was concerned what is the waste being generated. So we were just exploiting and exploiting. But what we need to do is tech-enabled, circular economy-driven, AI-driven surveillance, so that we get to know what is where and where we need to take the step in order to get the things or regenerate the sea life or sea capital. So traditionally, GDP calculations that we normally do, what we do is we don't look at the environmental degradation. We simply look at what are the numbers, how the GDP, what is the economy contribution. So only the numbers, what is, how much money I'm getting out of it. For example, if I have to look at the mangroves, it's for a traditional GDP calculator, it is just a wood stock. They will be simply getting the wood, how much it is being cut, the wood is sent to the market, what is the value of the wood, and then it is numbers and calculated and contribution to the GDP. But when we look at the sustainability, it's being seen from a different perspective. It's seen from the perspective of if this mangrove is being removed, what is going to affect? So what it is presently doing, like the mangroves, their roots are into the deep sea kind of areas, not deep sea, like they just flood and all other disasters which could happen because of the tides. They all they protect the coastal line against that. And also in the roots of the mangroves, different kind of species, they have their habitat, they live there, they survive on the roots. So if the mangroves are cut, this entire infrastructure will be wiped out. So basically, when as an environmental accounting person, I have to calculate what can be the contribution or what can be the value of this. What I will be calculating is if I remove this, the kind of protection that I'm getting from the mangroves, the kind of fishes that I'm getting from the mangroves, the kind of habitat my local people are getting from the mangroves, all that is quantified. And that amount of money is basically the economic value of having that mangroves. So for example, the Sundarban deltas, mangroves roughly around 900 kilometers or something like that. I may be estimating more. But if I have to create a wall to protect the floods, and also I have to create something, some plants or some kind of gardens, where I will be protecting the fish, different species and all that, I will be using lots of money, maybe around 500 billion crores or something like that. So if I have to use that amount of money and which is freely available to me at present, so that's the economic value the environmental account will consider for that mangrove. So that is missing in the traditional GDP calculations. So that's why we come for environmental accounting. So in that environmental accounting, what we do, we integrate statistics that illuminates the relationship between the environment and the economy, both the impact of the economy on the environment and the contribution of the environment to the economy. So both the things, the contribution and impact, both are being integrated in terms of numbers, calculated, quantified and added into it. This also provide information about the extraction of the natural resources, like we have to maintain a balance. For example, if I have to go in the sea for fishing, so I know that this 10 tons of fish is available somewhere. So in order to extract, I have to make sure that my extraction should not go beyond a limit that after certain period of time it again remains 10 tons. So I have to make a balance that 10 ton remains after, even after I keep getting the fish from there. So that kind of sustainability I have to maintain. So in the environmental account, we'll have both the things: what is present, what is going to be in the future, and what is available as surplus, which can be exploited or used for our economic purposes. So these accounts also present information in physical and monetary terms. So physical terms will also be there, and also the monitoring. So when physical things are converted into monetary terms, then only we feel that yes, something it is important that it need to be look into. So why environmental accounting is important? Because there are some things, especially the natural sustainability and natural resources, they cannot be quantified in the traditional economic or GDP calculations. So, and also the damages that is being done to the natural resources, they are not captured in the traditional economic accounting. So that's why we need environmental accounting. So for the purpose, United Nations System of Environment Economic Accounting, UNCR, we say it, have been come into picture. So it's an international standard for environment economic accounting, which was adopted by UN Statistical Commission in 2012. Basically, it's a conceptual framework for understanding the interaction between the economy and the environment. It also describes stocks and changes of environmental assets. It's based on agreed terms, like different countries have got different things. So it's a standard kind of framework wherein each country, as per their requirement, as per the availability of natural resources, they have, especially in the sea or in their nature, they can tweak some or the other components and made as per their requirements. So SIA has, okay. She has two broad frameworks, central framework and ecosystem accounting. Apart from these two frameworks, they have got other, as per requirements, they have water, they have energy, agriculture, forestry, etc. So if I have to talk, when we adopted in India, environmental accounting has started as early as in 1997, wherein just initiated in terms of few studies, and then comes a 2011 expert group for preparing the roadmap was established in 2013. This Green National Accounts for India framework, it was created by the expert group, uh, which has advocated for SIA accounts in phased manner. And 2016 interministerial group was constituted. Then in 2018, India has adopted, after 2012 SIA enhancements, India has adopted 2018 and has brought in the publications. So within the SIA framework, why ocean ecosystem accounting is important? Because ocean accounts, they integrate records of regularly compiled and comparable data concerning ocean account conditions. They also provide coherent structures. They also provide the monetary, the physical, and also relevant information for decision makers to look into various aspects in the ocean. So I have already talked like extraction to regeneration focused, which is going to be our next big thing. So in India, ocean accounting has started as early as in 2012, and then as of now we have brought in the National Ocean Account Framework, so under which the Tier 1 accounts have been prepared for at least 2-3 states. Kerala, Tamil Nadu are the pioneer in that. So for this purpose, both the Ministry of Statistics and Ministry of Earth Sciences, they have collaborated. So they are working together. Ministry of Earth Sciences is looking into all kind of data because they have got the infrastructure and also scientists and all kind of technical knowledge they have. And Ministry of Statistics role is to take all the data and put in the environment format. And that's how, just for example, these three things like fish stock valuation, carbon storages, and pollution, all these trackings and other different trackings can be done. So ocean ecosystem framework that India has brought in, it's basically highlights different kind of accounts, and also the it follows the SIA framework. In India, what we have done is, because for as per our requirement, we have brought in only 8 ecosystems: mangrove, coral reef, sea grasses, estuaries, lagoons, sandy coast, coastal ocean water, and mud flats within the ocean ecosystem. So basically, environmental accounting transforms ecological health into a measurable economic matrix. That will be part of it: mangrove, coral reef. So all these, they are available, and they will be quantified, their economic values, for understanding how it is being depleted and what is the stock at present. So all the accounts would be prepared for at least a period of 2 years. So I will be able to know what is the baseline and how it has changed over a period of 2 years, and where the interventions I need to do, because it will be having the physical, the quantification, and also the kind of amount. The So natural capital serves directly as the GDP of the poor, because the entire coastal communities, for their survival, they depend on the sea. For example, I was talking about the mangroves. So in for the mangroves, the coastal communities which are there in the mangroves, they are fully dependent on, for their livelihood, for their food, and also for their protection, the social protection, the physical protection. They are dependent on these mangroves. But if the mangroves are removed, it's going, and in order to protect them from the problems that they will be facing after the removal of the mangroves, lots of infrastructure have to be built. So that's how the things which are freely available to the poor is also an economic contribution. That's why we say that it's GDP of the poor. So the blue economy framework, basically, it's a balanced institutional growth. It has economics, ecology, technology, and policy. So all these things come together, and then an institutional context framework is prepared, where multidisciplinary targets and frameworks are created in order to ensure that economy sustainability both are enhanced. So these are the 6 focus areas to operationalize this ocean accounting framework. So again, it is inland waterways for logistic, then carbon shipping, low carbon shipping to promote global climate mandates, like green kind of energies are being used. Marine renewable grids are also for post-coastal infrastructure, then encouraging blue finance and specialized insurance for climate resilient projects. So what can be done is, in order to finance different blue economy projects, we can look into like green bonds. We can bring in blue bonds and capitalize on the capital markets. We can also then, looking at when there is a quantification of these and measurement of the blue economic resources there, even the insurance companies, they can come into picture. They can also look for the insurance. So this will also give rise to one kind of infrastructure, and also the communities in the coastal areas can be subsidized for blue infrastructure. We can also invest in the skill development and advanced marine and R&D technologies, and strengthening the port. So therefore, what we understand is that maritime infrastructure is not just working alone in silos. It's about the integration of everyone, the integration of the government, the integration of the industry, integration of the academics, the coastal communities. This will give rise to millions of job creation, and also it will enhance India's position, and may in future India can be one of the leaders in the blue economy, because we have got a vast area and we have got vast knowledge. And we can also, being a developing country, we can be the teachers or the mentors for all other development countries which are having similar kind of situations, or who are working on the similar kind of platforms. So these are the assets, coastal assets. Then SIA framework is basically for the sustainability. establishing a blueprint for leadership in the global south. So basically, uh, in the southern region, India is the highest kind of having the largest coastal line. So therefore, India can work as the leader for promoting technologies that India is having as of now. When I visited Inquires, they told me that they are providing lots of information, especially in terms of the Indian Ocean, to all other Indian Ocean countries, and not only the developing countries but also the developed countries who are asking for any kind of information, digital information about the sea temperatures or about the real time sea condition, health, and climate change. So this is the operational roadmap for blue economy. So that's what I think. I can just stand up because I keep
Thank
going.
you. A big round of applause for Sandhya ji.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry I take too much time.
No. It's wonderful. And as she mentioned, the coastal community and the seas are not only the GDP of the poor, they are GDP of everyone. The ocean accounts for almost more than 50% of the oxygen produced. And the breath you are taking, every second breath is from the oceans. And to explain all this, we have a very distinguished scientist from our scientific community, Dr. Rasik Ravindra sir. May I now request you to kindly give your comments? Please.
Professor Sandhya has given a very elaborate views on the blue economy, and I think she has left hardly anything that anybody can add to that. But just to summarize a few ideas, I think it is the India's view on blue economy. They are dependent on the balance, driving a balance between the economic growth and the environmental sustainability. So these two things, if you consider together as a bucket, where you have to have the economic development and you also have to consider the environmental sustainability, then only you can really encash the fruits of the blue economy. And then you will also be in line with the Sustainable Development Goal of the United Nations, as she said, 14, 15 and others. But the point to consider here is that the concept of blue economy is, I can say, is comparatively a recent one. But much before that, in 1980s and 81, when the Indian Ocean Expedition was launched by the international community, and Professor Panikkar was the man who took the lead in that. That was actually the period when the seeds of the blue economy were laid out. And then the result was two very great results were there. One was the establishment of National Institute of Oceanography, and second was the program on the polymetallic nodules. So these polymetallic nodules, if you know, they are the sources of manganese, copper, lead, zinc, and perhaps the minerals that we didn't know at that time, the critical minerals. So subsequently, when we had this blue economy concept and all that, much before that, we had something in our minds about taking resources from the oceans. For example, if you go back to the development of the NIOT, National Institute of Ocean Technology, they were pioneers in developing a low temperature thermal desalination. Very simple technology where they could pump water from the deep sea, cold water from the deep sea, bring it up in a vacuum, and then convert it into the drinking water. The result was so fascinating that the three major islands, in Lakshadweep, the entire health position of those people changed, drastically changed. And then there was a survey conducted by economic, there's a group in New Delhi, National Economic, they do the surveys. And their comment was that the advisory, the fishery advisory that is being given by the Enquires, and the other, this fresh water which is being supplied to the local islands, this in fact is contributing to the GDP, maybe indirectly. But you consider the byproducts, the health conditions of those people, islanders, which has drastically improved. Or the trawlers which used to burn lakhs and lakhs of the fuel, that has been reduced because now the fishermen know where they have to go, where they have to catch the product. So these things are not directly related, but then they have a huge impact on the sustainability, on the growth and all that. So I was just going through, and then you see the concept of deep mineral exploration. There are two major aspects of resources from the ocean, apart from what she said, tourism and other things, and wind energy and fuel energy and all those. The one is the living resources, and another is the non-living resources. Living resources are very well known. There's plenty of non-living resources because we are gradually depleting our earth from all these resources, base metal resources and all that. So where is the window? Where is the place where we can go and get them? These are only the ocean beds. And then whether it is manganese, it is iron, it is critical minerals, it is copper, it is lead, it is zinc, it is chromium, all these minerals which you require for the modern technology, they are only present in the deep sea. And those locations of the deep sea where they are present have already identified. For example, they have to be in the mid-ocean regions. They have to be areas where the subduction has taken place. So we know those locations. We have applied for the seabed to the Seabed Authority for doing exploration in those areas. And number of expeditions have been launched. Places have been identified. And we are just waiting for the technology to be to take birth so that those things can be taken out and they can be converted into metals. So we are gradually on the path. And very recently, Niti Aayog also has given a strategic guidance, which is called India's Blue Economy Strategy for Harnessing Deep Sea, Offshore and Fisheries. So people are on the move. And then if you see how science is contributing to all this, big way, the way the climate change is taking place, the way the heat of the equators is being transported to both the poles, North Pole and the South Pole, the way the Atlantic meridian ocean turning is taking place, and the fear that is rising in the global community that if AMOC, Atlantic meridional overturning, reduces, there will be a basic changes in the ocean circulation. And once the ocean circulation gets depleted, the atmosphere will get different, because ocean atmosphere, they work as a closed system. And then we do not know what will happen, because all the atmosphere, the monsoon and everything is related to our agriculture, and then agriculture is related to the GDP. So all these things are related in a vicious circle. If you disturb one thing, the other thing gets disturbed. Now, our oceans are becoming, they are, as Dr. said, they are producing the oxygen that we breathe from phytoplankton and from other things. But they are also the deep sink of the carbon. And most of the oceans are becoming acidic because they have absorbed most of those carbon dioxide, which we were not thinking that they will do. So what will happen ultimately, that the scientists have to come out with some solution, how to remove this acidic nature of the ocean. Somehow the glaciers are melting, so the fresh water is entering into the glaciers. So that is also causing some sort of a relief to the human race. So we have hopefuls, we have hopes, we also have the dangers. So basically, we have to work in some sort of a equilibrium to see that the nature is restored, equilibrium is restored, and we need not harm the earth beyond the limit that it cannot be recovered. I think I'll put a stop to that. And
thank you, sir, for taking that forward. It's a very important aspect of carbon sequestration and the carbon sink the ocean provides. India's ambition or relationship with ocean is not a policy kind of an ambition. We have been a maritime nation right from ancient times, and the world's earliest known dock at Lothal was in India. And our literature talks a lot about sea. The Tamil Sangam says that sea is a place of work, it is a place of commerce, and it is a place of wonder also. All the wonders what Dr. Rasika Ravindra mentioned about the sea. But in the end, I would like to leave you with a thought, and that's an important aspect or a simile with respect to the Samudra Manthan, which we had, and the mythological story of the Samudra Manthan. The sustainability aspect of the seas cannot be ruled out or cannot be harnessed without collaborative effort. So the Samudra Manthan was a collaborative effort between two. Now, besides that, any industrial or economic process will produce some or the other affluence or pollution and waste. So the circular economy, to handle this waste, as was the waste or the pollution or the pollutant or the toxin produced in Samudra Manthan, was that poison, and we have to have a sink like Shiva or the ocean to have take that or balance it out. A solid foundation is required as the kurma or the tortoise on which the foundation was there, and that is the economic framework which we require. So taking back, all these abundant gifts which emerged during the Samudra Manthan, the Kamdhenu and the Amrit, and so many abundant gifts, as Dr. Rasik Ravindra is mentioning, the critical minerals, and so they will emerge only if we harness this technology, harness this Samudra very sustainably. So with that thought, I would like to thank all our panelists today, Dr. Ravindra, an eminent scientist, Ms. Sandhya Singh. She is now researching in the field of finance and technology, and she has taken some sabbatical from MOSPI, and now she's into the world of finance. So I would request her to dwell more into the world of blue finance, because that will take our country much forward, because we got a large potential. And I of course thank Dr. Pankhuri Gaur, who's again a very, very eminent researcher in the field of blue economy. Thank you very much for being present here today. May I now request the admin team to kindly help us felicitate the eminent speakers who have come today. Yeah. Please, any questions? Yes.
Thank you. My name is Mohammed Koya. I'm Fisheries Development Commission, the Ministry of Fisheries, Department of Fisheries. Thank you, Sandhya Madam, for an excellent presentation on Blue Economy Framework. My observation on the presentation is that the fisheries production you said is actually 19.9 now, 19.5 million in the 2025 data. Of that, only 1% is from marine. Remaining is from aquaculture, and the aquaculture is on the inland and on the in the freshwater side. Now we have to take that with a caution of when you are accounting for economy, for blue economy. But this 25%, yeah, that is very important from livelihood and ecology from marine, because our discussions were, but you started with actually marine aquaculture, mariculture, which I thought it is a right way of looking at it. In the sea, the potential for now to enhance our production is the aquaculture in the sea. There's immense potential. Now you said China is the leader. China leads because their production in aquaculture, not only in inland but in marine aquaculture. They have a lot of advantages with respect to suitable sites for aquaculture with the technology. Now for India, it is a challenge because we need a technology a little more stronger, because we don't have very conducive environment in the coastal areas for aquaculture with the present technology. Our seas are more exposed. Our ocean, actually coastal area, a lot of fishing activities happen. So compromise, we have to do it in the offshore. Mariculture in offshore area is investment rich. It has a lot of challenges with environmental conditions. So the technology again. So in the framework, in the operational framework, what you said, it ideally need a place for marine offshore, marine aquaculture, especially aquaculture in general, is an important one which we need to figure out. I think it was missing in the operational framework what you mentioned. So because food source is actually not from wild capture. Now we are not expect wild capture to contribute to our food sources. It is from aquaculture. Globally, that is a practice. The global trend is recently changed to around 50% from aquaculture, but in India it was, I think, since 2000, early 2000, mid of 2000, we have taken over aquaculture, taken over the wild capture fisheries. The global trend is only last year it took over from wild to aquaculture. So we are ahead but our aquaculture was on the inland and on the land-based aquaculture with shrimp focus on shrimp. Shrimp is contributing around 60%, and the export is around 72,000 crores, which is main part is from shrimp. So these kind of dynamics will also be figured out in the framework and in the operation thing. Thank you.
Also, you would like to enlighten the audience about the deep sea fishing aspect of it and the prospects where mesopelagic catches and all, which we don't do, and their relation with respect to marine biotechnology, which is also very important.
Yeah, actually, the next paradigm for wild capture fisheries is the offshore fishing with deep sea, focus on deep sea. We are already fishing in the EZ. We have around 200 nautical miles. We are seeing the EZ for the bottom and midwater pelagic resources in the near coastal area, but in the offshore, tunas and mainly tunas because it has a good economic significance. But the other non-conventional resources was, Shishir have told, the myctophids and the deep sea squid and few other resources which is in the high seas or in the EZ and the high seas in the vicinity of our country, and of course other resources in the polar and southern oceans. These are opportunities which we need to explore for to sustain.
You have raised the issue of the polar areas. I would like to add here. Very recently, India has decided to go to the Southern Ocean beyond the Antarctic convergence and to touch the Antarctic waters also and cash the CAMLR quota of India, because we are a constituent of the CAMLR Convention on Conservation of Antarctic Resources. So the rules are being framed because the Antarctic Treaty, which was Antarctic Act of India, which was passed in 2022, it didn't have the particular rules for the fishery as such. It dealt on very large scale on the Antarctica, operations in Antarctic, science in Antarctic, but we had very few coverage on the fishing in the Antarctic waters. So these rules are being framed now, and I think the institute in Cochin, the CMLRA, they are already working towards and cashing this provision which is given in the commission and take some of the toothfish and krills from the deep waters of Antarctic convergence.
Thank you. Actually, sir, it is an excellent initiative by Government of India to have a framework for exploring the Southern Ocean resources. That is, actually, it is working on, and we compliment the Ministry of Earth Sciences for taking that. Thank you.
We have regular expeditions to Southern Ocean.
So thanks for the clarification. I will take into account what you have said.
The young researcher has some question to ask.
Firstly, for this insightful session. So my question would be, as we talk about this kind of cruise development across states, so can we also use this inland waterways like water taxis? In one of the futuristic city, Amaravati, they've shown these images of water taxis. So can we expand this to other cities as well? And also seaplanes. Can we also include these in the tourism? And also in the fragmented world order, how can we ensure that our crustaceans or our fishes could export to developing countries? Because this tariff session, when we saw that Andhra, which is also one of the blue economy, like it depends on the aquaculture, it has taken some shocks when the US market has kept some tariffs. So how can we diversify our markets, and what role can this non-coastal states can play in this like in the role of the blue economy, non-coastal states?
Taxis, we are already, Cochin water metro is existing, where we are having 75 odd water transport. They are all electric ferries. So similarly, 111 national waterways have been notified, and they have been notified not only for cargo but passenger movement. So there is an effort towards, you are aware about the Namami Ganga project. The Namami Ganga project has got 4 pillars. Nirmal Ganga, related to the purity of water and quality of water. Aviral Ganga, related to the river basin management of flow and water because of all this. Arth Ganga. Arth Ganga is related to the economy, which it can generate, what our friend from the Ministry of Fisheries talked about, the inland fishing. And the Gyan Ganga, because all that is a circular economy. It comes together and it gives you a lot of knowledge. So that's the source of knowledge also. So that's as part of the inland connectivity and jetties and other things. What was your second question? Export diversification. I would request our, because he is the most, yeah.
Actually, we have just witnessed the that diversification, what government's initiatives have helped. We are actually in the last 1 year, we were subject to a severe trade related. Our major trade is actually shrimp, and shrimp goes to USA. USA had been our. Now this opportunity, what the USA posed to us, helped us to diversify. In fact, our production, our export increased by another 10,000 million. Like it has become from 62 to 72,000. 1,000 crores. So it has only helped us to increase, and that is because our entrepreneurs or the exporters quickly go to new markets, mainly the eastern markets in the east. We could sell our products, and then with shrimp itself, because shrimp, we thought only Americans eat shrimp. Shrimp is going from us to back to America only, but in another form from someone else. So we had actually the Ministry of Commerce and the Ministry of Fisheries working together. The government actually facilitated the exporters, the industry, and with all that facilitation, they have only done better. So diversification is part of it. Business, the people know where the market is available. They quickly material flow there, and we make use of the benefit. So we have just witnessed the capability of India in diversifying our market, and definitely that is a way forward for us. But value addition, of course, we need to add value to our products, and then we utilize further. We can enhance our export to 1 lakh ton, 1 lakh crores in another 2-3 years itself. If we spent our export value added export is around less than 20%, which is a weakness of ours, which we are government as a department. Both the commerce as well as the fisheries ministry are focusing on enhancing. Thank you.
Value chain integration, the byproducts and the further products out of the fisheries.
Of course,
they
yeah,
are more, yeah.
Yes. And
Dr. Pangudi, would you like to?
I'll just add on to what Sir said, that India is also focusing on. You can see that we have launched quite a few FTAs with different countries, even on the developed countries, where we are focusing on Europe, Australia, and even we already have FTAs and bilateral agreements with the East Asian countries. To what he said, that it's not only that we can see there is an intra-regional trade in fisheries within the developing countries. So in the Indo-Pacific region, if you see specifically in IORA countries, there has been an intra-regional trade, and which has been increasing, and we are also talking about where the countries are exporting the fish feed as well. So not only the fish, but the byproducts are also being exported. So that is why, and because we have been focusing on the fisheries sector, that is why we were able to diversify as well, as Sir mentioned.
Huge opportunity for the younger generation to, let's say, start startups and stuff like that. Huge opportunity.
I think we'll. Oh,
Sorry. Sorry, very quick question. Sandhya ma'am, you had a very excellent presentation on offshore wind potential also. And when I was going through that slide, I saw 70 gigawatt of potential is available in India, specifically for Gujarat and Tamil Nadu. And I did read up last year the news for offshore wind tender that was released, and how due to lack of developer interest, even though the viability gap funding mechanism was adopted and ports were also supposed to be upgraded, even then there has been a lack of clarity and lack of information on what's the next step for 2026 offshore wind itself. So that's something I would want to know, because that's an excellent opportunity in terms of energy also that we do have in the deep sea.
The point you have made is a very good point, but frankly, I have not gone much into that, the problems that you're talking about. So I just looked into what is happening and what can be done. But I will definitely look into it, and maybe other panelists, if they have any answer, because I don't have. So very good question. Thank you.
Yeah, all good technologies there available, and I think in Andhra they are working on that, especially if the tidal energy, people are working on that already. They are working on that. So some work has already started with respect to owning the complete value chain, the turbines and everything. And Adani has done some good work in Gujarat, and they have not reached those potentials what she brought out,
but they've started with aggregating at least to the tune of 500 megawatt through offshore wind energy. All the ports have also been told to create microgrids with respect to not only the solar potential of these ports, where you will find, like in Vizag port, if you go to Vizag, when you are traveling from the city towards the port side, you would find a huge solar panel. So that's owned by the Vizag Port Authority. So that's the solar part of it, but they've also been told to integrate the offshore wind energy, and that's another. So they'll create and these microgrids and renewable energy, harness this, and then provide it back to the ecosystem itself, in the sense that the ships visiting these ports would be utilizing the shore power supply rather than running their own diesel generator. So that will not only reduce the carbon footprint and less pollution, but it will also promote the renewable energy. So those efforts are on, and of course there's a long way to go, and it's only the younger generation which can take this forward in an accelerated mode, isn't it? Yeah, thank you very much, and a big round of applause for the panelists here. Request our friend Dr. Vijay from the Ministry of Earth Science to come and felicitate our Professor Vijay, or Dr. Vijay is an eminent scientist from Ministry of Earth Science, and he's just super animated, but we still want his presence in all our efforts. So may I request.
It's an honor to receive from one of my old friends. Thank you. Dr. Sandhya. We can have a good photo. Yes.
There is an exhibition going outside, and the photographer has picked the Nanda Devi and the Nanda Devi and the Sunanda Devi standing next to each other. Thank you.
Attending this event. Thank you so much.